as far as rugby was concerned at Fairfield, everything was new. You were blazing new trails both on the field and off the field at parties. You were running the club by yourselves. Let's talk about what happened and what that meant to the three of you. Let's start with the game. What was it like? How did you choose your teams? And what would a typical game day be like at Corbett Field?
Well, it's a good question, because we went into a bit of this before, where we were on new grounds, and we were kind of feeling our way as we went along. And as everybody got used to what the game was all about, we had to decide who was going to play in what position. And we had kind of a semi-official selection committee. And as I recall, it was myself, Doug Siassi, Jeff Campbell, maybe Dan Gaddy. We really looked at who attended all the practices, who was fairly adept at the game, and who could probably hold up and represent us the best. And from that point on, we would go ahead and change, and as more people came on to join the team, we'd get into B squads, and then at some point they even had C squads. So we tried to be equitable about it, and would sometimes rotate around depending upon folks' schedules of who could make the most scrimmages, and just try to do our best to put together and field the team.
Pete mentioned that being adept at the game was one of the standards. What's interesting is that we were all football players. We played football in high school. I'd never seen a rugby game until I got to Fairfield. So part of the problem was, or part of the issue was, to teach rugby to all of these people. And we didn't know how to do it. Doc Kenyon was a bit of a help, because he was the liaison with the university, and he was the one who tried to get these football players to play rugby. And the other point Pete made about the fact that people would blend in at times, because with an A team and a B team, there were people whose schedules couldn't accommodate all of the practices, but we could always work them in because we had enough slots.
Yeah, that's true. And as a typical rugby project, it was never perfect. And some slots were always easy to fill out of 3 teams, but some were always controversial. And I can always remember after the selection committee, we'd type up the results, and then like a thief in the night, go running into the campus center and tack it up on a bulletin board and run like hell, so you didn't have to explain to the guys who thought they'd make the A team that didn't. But it all worked out. Everybody realized that it wasn't malicious.
Well, the one thing that was perfect about the game were the parties.
Yeah.
Talk about them.
Parties were interesting, and it really is truly a game that is 50% played on the field, 50% off the field. And if you don't have a party, you don't schedule that team for next year. It is part and parcel of the game. They go hand in hand. And we would have our parties down either one of 2 places. The old firehouse, which was a terrific place to have a party because it was kind of out of the way. And then the other place was the Nautilus. And it was a wonderful place to gather. And what's interesting is we just found out this past week at the Bill Conley induction that many of the teams are playing now on Sunday. And many of us cannot imagine playing a game on Sunday, having a party, and then going to school on Monday morning. Sunday was used to recoup mentally and physically, without a doubt. And you needed that time. So I'm glad I'm not playing now.
I wouldn't want to play Sunday.
No way.
The social nature of the game drew a lot of people to it, obviously, because that was new to us too. And we all we wanted to win, but we also played for the beer. I mean, that was much different than anything we'd experienced before.
And it was at a time when it was the 60s, and it was anti-establishment mentality going around. Everybody was a little bit of a renegade, so to speak.
Rugby attracted that type of person?
Not
Player,
necessarily.
no?
The game attracted. The game attracted that type of person. I don't know. Now, when you talk about these two guys, reprobates, I mean, what can I say? We'd go down and get them out on bail, you know, and get the warrant lifted so we could get them to
So they
play.
could play again.
It was working out very, very well. But I mean, seriously, the game came at a time when it filled a vacuum, a real void for, like Tom said, a lot of football players. Testosterone was rampant, freshmen, sophomores in college, and it was the right item, the right time for the right people. And the uniqueness was the camaraderie that was so evident that kept on building with not only playing together and beating each other up, but partying together afterwards, and that just kept on rolling to this day where it's outstanding. You were going to say.
And put it in the context, as Pete said, of the 60s. This was a little troublesome to the administration as well. And the class of 65, I think, deserves a lot of credit because the future of the club was by no means certain in those early days. It was a club sport.
Yep.
We had no funding. We weren't a part of the athletic department. And so it was, and the parties were something that were troubled the administration. Now, Doc Kenyon was a bit of a liaison and
Very much so.
helped out in that regard. But the class of 65 kept it going in a fairly responsible way so that by the time they graduated and my class and the people I played with sort of took over and brought in Chris's group, it was stable by that time. But in the early days, it was uncertain. The administration was a little bit worried.
We got zero support.
Yeah.
Everything that came to finance us came out of our own pockets.
Right.
The uniforms, the travel, everything. And as I look back, maybe that wasn't so bad because we didn't have any constraints on us in a way. So we were doing our own thing the way that we were trying to make our own model of following other clubs in the area. And we must have done something right because we're having a 50th reunion of those that followed us afterwards. So
The
that is-
administration was hoping you were going to go away by not
Very
providing any
much.
support
Right.
whatsoever. Yeah, but
Very-
it didn't
I
happen.
think
No.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now it's a big part of the school life.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any particular game memories that you'd like to share that stand out?
Well,
Or
Oh my
players,
gosh.
other than yourselves?
I'd like to say that the very first game that we played at Fordham was incredibly uplifting. We actually were organized, we had a good game, we beat them, and the one thing I love to take claim to, and I'm sorry, but I just am not humble, was the ability to kick the winning 2 points. And I don't know why I was chosen to kick it, because Ken Waters was a far, far better kicker than I was. So I can't remember the circumstances, but we won. And then the second thing that I really love to think about is coming in second at the very first 7-a-sides that we attended down at Van Cortlandt Park. And I think if we lifted up everybody's pants, you would see scars galore on our knees from all the bottle caps and the shreds of glass that were on that cold, hard ground. But more importantly, from that
Yeah.
game, we met a referee named Malachi McCourt, who is a legend in his own time, and many people will remember his brother Frank McCourt, the author of Angela's Ashes. He owned a bar right across the street from Van Cortlandt Park. And we were in sky-high heaven. They were calling us the Cinderella team. We came out of absolutely nowhere. Nobody heard of us. Siasi was absolutely on the top of his game. And the speed, they couldn't believe that he had, and he could turn on a dime. So we were really, really up in the air. Just the fact that we had been on the roster to play would have been enough for us, but to come in second against the old Blues, which were the predominant team at the time, were fantastic. So Malachi was blown away with us too, and he says, "Come on over, I own a little bar across the street." So we all walked over there, and it was accumulation of camaraderie, Irish humor, a lot of beer. And I had the girl with me who was my date then, who's now my wife, and she and Malachi, June and Malachi, got along famously. And if I hadn't known her better, and if I hadn't known him fairly well, I would have thought he was hitting on her, but he wasn't. It was just the Irish familiarity.
The charm.
So they had fun together, and he went on to become a very, very well-known, I suppose you could say, late-night talk celebrity. And of course, his brother became the big famous author. Malachi wrote a few books, you know, too. But he reffed many of the games afterwards too. So that was a very, very famous introduction that I love to remember. So I'm sure you guys have.
Malachi was sort of the personification of a rugby player.
Yeah.
Big man, big red beard, loud, boisterous. He was a character.
Yeah.
Loved to sing at the top of his lungs, and loved to drink beer.
Yeah.
So that was a great introduction to the game of rugby. But
What
I
about
remember
the singing traditions of
Pardon?
rugby? What about the singing traditions at rugby parties? Did you get schooled in those by Malachi, or did you come by those naturally?
That was
You're
another
a
learning.
natural lush.
I don't particularly remember any real rugby type songs. I think some of that came later through some of the other clubs. But since Malachi's was a public bar, I don't recall too much singing. I mean, we might have had 100 bottles of beer on the wall, something like that, but nothing that was purely rugby. And I myself don't even know any purely rugby songs, which is, that happens, you know, when you're as old as I am.
You're showing your age.
Well, speaking of parties, you know, when you associate parties with rugby, it's typically the after-game party, which I had a hard time coping with that, not knowing what rugby was, and clinking glasses with a guy that we were beating up on an hour prior. But it grows on you, and once you embrace it, you never ever let it go. But I wanted to stress another kind of party. The ones after the game are great, but one of the great things about the Ruggers is that when you're a lowly freshman and you come to Fairfield, I'm very much in awe of the upperclassmen, and that's the way it should be. They've paid their dues, they're the man. I'm just a freshman. And if you were part of the rugby team, you were invited to every single party that went on, not having to do with after the game party, just a party on the beach. That was huge. The assumption that you're one of the guys. That's, you know, you're one of us. Of course you're invited to the party. And that concession with the upperclassmen, Tom lived in a party house, Bart Freeney lived in a party house, and John Swanhouse did. And if there was a party, it didn't matter if you were a lowly freshman, you were invited. And by the way, you were treated like an equal. It wasn't like, well, you freshmen, like an Animal House, you sit over there. You were one of the guys. And I never forgot that, and I made a point of paying that forward to the pups when I became an upperclassman.
It was not only a game of great equalizer, but it was that fraternity. It made no difference what year you were, and you were into the game type of thing. And I know this seems to be kind of patronizing in a way that oh, this game is very, no, but there is something very, very special. There's no other sport that I'm aware of that has all these things tied together in one big lump. And it kind of, you know, race, loquitur, it speaks for itself, so pardon my Latin, it's been a while, but it really is something that is hard to totally define in a single sentence. It's a combination of things. But I'd like to mention something about what Tom said, that we all were football players, and whether you were a good football player or a bad football player, average, most of us had that typical American heritage background in football. And in bringing that to the game, everyone wanted to just run straight through somebody instead of totally passing off the lateral and playing some of the finesse of the game. And at the Harvard B School game, when they beat us by, I think, 2 points, but our very first game, I know that later games, they didn't work out too well with the parties afterwards, but my personal recollection was that we had some very good interaction. All the guys were from the UK, they were from France, from Germany, all from our point of view, professional rugby players, and they gained their yardage by kicking the ball. And as the ball went out of bounds, that was your next line out. And that's how you advance down the field without getting pummeled to death. So that was what we tried to instill as one of the points of the game, to practice kicking. And Kenyon was always on us. The great Scott was saying, kick that bloody ball and get your yardage that way. So we learned, and it was a great experiment for us all. And,
Doc was always yelling, get the ball out to the wing. You got to get it out to the wing. And the other thing was, you move it, you advance it by kicking it downfield. And it took a few seasons, but
yeah.
And we were competitive right away, I think. I'm not sure we would have won as many games as we did without Doug Siassi, but we were competitive right away because we listened. It took a few seasons, but we listened and started to become rugby players.
There's a certain beauty in the ignorance. There was a bliss of just going about it our own way, following something, trying to go ahead and build it. And I think if somebody had presented all the rules to us in the beginning, I think people would have shied away from it. So it was that combination of people like Chris said, you're welcome anytime, any class, the game itself and the camaraderie and the party afterwards. It's one big package, and you can't take a piece out of that. It's all together.
I mean, only until very recently have there been coaches. I mean, it was a student-run sport, club sport, and
First couple seasons, we just ran it ourselves, and then we realized there was a need for some administrative offices. I mean, I did all the stuff the first year, the uniforms, the arrangement of the games for my contacts in other schools and clubs, and it took a lot of time, and we realized that had to change and fit into the mold of what the other club system was like. President, vice president, treasurer, and then somebody that you could go ahead and assign some of the phone calls to set up a schedule. So that was part of the evolution.
Yeah, students ran the practices, lined the field, did everything, and we were trying to recruit people at the same time, because with an A and a B team and a later a C team, you needed a lot of players. So as the class of '65 passed it on to the class of '66, we were trying to get people to replace these guys who were pretty good athletes. I remember Frank Quinn, who was in my class, and played on the original team, I think. Coming to me and because John Bender was about to graduate with you guys, and he was the guy who was in the lineup.
That's right.
He was the jumper.
My mentor.
He was your mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And Quinn came to me one day and said, there's this guy, big tall guy, blonde hair. We got to get him into this. And I saw Quinn a few days later, and I said, what's wrong with you, Quinn? He can't keep out of his own way. What are you talking about? But that's how we got Chris into it. And John mentored you and
he did.
Got you into the game. Yeah.
Yep.
And the thing is, we had injuries, and so if someone couldn't play the next game, we needed to fill that spot, and that's why I think having the B teams and sometimes the C teams was kind of like a feeder system for the A team too. Right. So it really worked out, because mainly we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and we were just going by the seat of our pants, but it worked nicely.
It's a complex game to get really good at. It really is. Yeah.
There are two names here, John Swanhouse and John Sullivan. Can you tell us about?
Well, John Swanhouse was our hooker, and Swanee was just a gentleman. I mean, he had the greatest personality, always upbeat, awfully good hooker, and how much can you say about him without adding more and more superlatives? He had everything, just a good amount of leadership to him, and I was so pleased to hear, but not surprised, that he became vice president of Pepsi-Cola. And John Sullivan was another fellow who I understand has passed away, and he was a very tall, lanky guy, and was good in the lineouts too. So we really had some very interesting characters. Everybody was an individual, because it's kind of a team individual game. You've got to give up that ball to lateral to get the forward movement, or you've got to learn how to kick, but it's a team. There's no I in the word team, and I think everybody lived up to that.
I didn't know John Sullivan, but Swanee was a really big Fairfield University supporter to the point where he was elected to the board of directors for at least one 4-year term. And so he was a very, very adamant Fairfield supporter after he graduated. Great guy. I miss him dearly.
Yeah.
And died way too young.
Yeah, I didn't know Sullivan too well, but Swanee was just a solid person,
Yeah.
and a solid player. He was the only hooker that we had for a long time, and he was always there, very dependable. Never worried about the ball would get to us. He would get us the ball, and I never worried about behind us. Gaddy would take care of that. Too. Really solid player.
Yep.
Yep.
He's one of these guys that you play with, and you see that he is really giving 120%, and he's winded and he's bruised and sweaty and all that. And when you see him perform like that, it just motivates the hell out of you to do the same thing, so you don't let him down. He was a very, very inspirational leader on the field and off.
Very much, yeah. And what a gentleman. I mean,
Yeah.
What do you think they'll be thinking as they're looking down from heaven and you guys celebrating the 50th?
He
anniversary
is
of the
looking
rugby?
down with Doug Siasi right now, I'm sure, and Jay Kerwin as well, and the other Fallon ruggers. And they're probably just amazed, as our founder here was yesterday when he walked into the group with the Hall of Fame induction. And that makes me feel good, because they were all part of getting the club formed.
I suspect they're looking down on us, sharing a warm beer.
Yeah, oh yeah. And probably with their arms around angels too, by the way. They were very popular guys.
Oh, yes. Do you think that playing rugby helped you in that area? You know, since it was an all-male institution until 1970, did being on the rugby team help you meet young women?
Not that I would know, because I was not a ladies' man. I was a real wallflower in high school, and one of the things that appealed to me at Fairfield was I went to an all-boys Jesuit high school, so a Jesuit 4 more years was perfect for me. And the rugby club was another extension. It's not like being a rugby player, you were Tom Cruise and got the babes. To be honest, you still had to rely on Marymount, New Rochelle, and Manhattanville to send buses like cattle to our mixers. And it was very artificial kind of setup. And I can't say that, being a rugger in that area, was a benefit for playing rugby, at least in my case. These two guys, I don't know, they were hard to keep up with socially. They had.
I was.
You had some talent at your parties.
I was in a different category, because I had my high school sweetheart from New Rochelle at every single game except the Brown game, and that was probably just as well, because we didn't have a party afterwards. So I'd like to go ahead and say to my wife June that she must be considered the prime rugger hugger. And she always was there and enjoyed the crew, enjoyed the parties and everything. So I never had to worry about getting a date.
What are some traditions, either on the field or off, that stand out in your memories? Anything?
Predictions?
Traditions.
Oh, traditions. I like the tradition of attending the 5-year reunions a lot. And I've always volunteered my time to make sure that happened. And believe me, it's the easiest job in the world, because when you get somebody on the phone or harass them with emails like I do Tom, it just to get me off their back, they'll show up, if for no other reason. For that reason, it doesn't matter what number it is. The 55th will be fun too. It's not as numerically significant as the 50th, but it'll be well attended, and it'll be great fun as well. I like to follow on communications from your blood brothers.
I've been out of the loop for a long time, and was just recently brought back in. And I'm just amazed at how the tradition has been carried on so well and so well attended from the 45th and now the upcoming 50th. And to think that over 1,000 people will be coming to Fairfield in October. I'm not aware of any school that has a single sport that has the cumulative amount of bodies attending any type of reunion of that size. So I think it says something for the sport and those that played it.
Yeah, I've been surprised at the at how the club has flourished, frankly, in these 50 years. And I think that's a credit to Chris and some others, but Chris has been central in that keeping the club going. And I think, too, naming the field for Hans Grauert was a big part of the tradition of the Fairfield Rugby Club. I think that was important.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Chris and I talked about this after I kind of got brought into the fold, and being in forensics, it was a understandable loss for him and his family, and not having the ability to retrieve anything from his brother's body to bring home. I think the field is an enormous daily living tribute and a memorial to his brother and to the generosity of his brothers and Chris's family. It's an enormous gift.
Well, thank you. We look at it that way too, and
Yeah.
we love it, and it makes sure that we never forget Hans, and it just warms all of our hearts every year that it's there. So thank you for your kind words.
It's never, ever going to be forgotten of why that field is there.
Right.
And to the best of my knowledge, I'm told that it's the only field, athletic field in the country that's dedicated solely to the playing of rugby. So I hope that
Yeah.
condition
Yeah.
and tradition is never broken and always honored.
Yeah. It's very touching. I know from the reunions ever since the field was constructed in '69, every reunion there are 5 more classes, of course, that are attend. And when I go there, I have so many young pups come up to me, and it's not for no other reason, but they just say, "Tell me about your brother." We're really interested, and they're not being nice to an old man because I'm busy talking to these guys here. But I love it. Their heart is in the right place, and and they say, "We really like the field, and please thank your mom for purchasing it, because we really have embraced it as our field." And those are perfect words to hear for me, and it's always wonderful to see them so interested. And again, it's a legacy thing. Even if that tragedy hadn't happened, I wouldn't let these guys fall off the end of the earth without tracking them down like dogs and communicating with them and all that. It's legacy is a really wonderful trait to have in any organization, and I think we have it in spades.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tom, Pete, and Chris, as the 3 guys who were very instrumental in the founding of the Rugby Club, would you care to propose a toast to the club on this occasion?
I certainly would. We all would. Here's to the thousands of men and women who played for the Fairfield University Rugby Club.
For those who are no longer with us,
And those who will follow in our footsteps. Enjoy the tradition and continue the legacy.
Cheers.
cheers.